monitor flatlined. Naomi's hands didn't stop moving. "Come on," she said through her teeth. Not to anyone in the room. To him. To the body on the table that had arrived at her dock at 2 in the morning, with 2 stab wounds. No name, no record, no business being alive, and somehow still fighting for it. Come on. Been inside him for 40 minutes. The deeper laceration had nicked something it shouldn't have, and the bleed was quiet, which was the worst kind, the kind that doesn't announce itself until you're already behind. She'd caught it. Barely. And now his pressure had dropped and the monitor was screaming. And Jiang Mai across the table was looking at her with eyes that said do something, and Naomi was already doing it. 15 seconds. She worked. 30 seconds. She worked. The monitor beeped. Once. Then again. Then settled into a rhythm that was weak, but real. Climbing slowly the way a man pulls himself up a wall, hand over hand, inch by inch, refusing to let go. Naomi exhaled once. Set her instrument down. Looked at what she'd done good. It was good. The man on the table opened his eyes, she said. Don't move, he said. I know. And something about those 2 words, not thank you, not am I okay, not the usual flood of post-surgical disorientation. Something about the way he said I know, like he'd always known he would survive, like he'd decided that the moment he chose her, made her breath catch in her chest for just a second before she locked it back down. This is where the story starts, not at the beginning. Not with her childhood or her degrees, or the 11 years she spent becoming someone the world couldn't ignore. Right here, 2 in the morning. A man bleeding on a table that wasn't supposed to be a surgical suite, in a room that wasn't supposed to exist in the record books. A woman with blood on her gloves, who had just made a decision she couldn't unmake. Her name was Dr. Naomi Grace Osei, 34 years old, lead trauma surgeon at Meridian General Hospital, Chicago, the kind of doctor who reduced mortality rates by 15% in 3 years and didn't frame the certificate because she was too busy doing the next thing, and the next, and the next. And 3 years after this night, she would walk into a boardroom and find him sitting at the head of it, new suit. No blood. Eyes that found hers across a full room in less than 10 seconds. And she would understand, in her body before her brain could catch up, that while she'd been trying to forget this night, he had been rebuilding her world around her. Quietly, completely, without asking permission. But that's later. Right now, she had a man to stabilize and a secret to bury. Naomi had not always been someone who operated in the dark. Growing up in Baltimore, daughter of a Ghanaian-American bus driver named Emmanuel, and a mother named Grace, who cleaned rooms at Johns Hopkins Medical Center, the same hospital where Naomi would do her residency 2 decades later. She had been raised in the light. In church light, specifically. In the kind of household where everything was done in the open, where secrets were considered disrespect to God and to family, where her mother's favorite saying was what's done in the dark comes to light. And it should, baby, it should. She had believed that. Mostly, she had also learned, young and fast, that the institutions built for other people had very specific ideas about how much light black women were allowed to occupy. Her medical school cohort had 3 black women in it when they started, 2 by graduation, 1 by the end of residency. Not because the others failed, because the system had a particular way of grinding down the people it hadn't been designed to hold, and Naomi had survived it by becoming something the system couldn't dismiss, not warmer, not softer, not more accommodating. Better. Undeniably, irrefutably, statistically better. She arrived at Meridian General 4 years before this night, with a reputation that preceded her, and an interior armor that nobody could quite name, but everybody could feel. Dr. Harold Putnam, the chief of surgery, interviewed her for 45 minutes, then sat back and said, "You're better than everyone else who applied." "You know that," she said. "I know." He hired her on the spot. She spent the next 4 years building something extraordinary in a hospital that kept trying to fund it inadequately. Equipment requests denied. Staffing requests deferred, then quietly buried. Board meetings where she presented data that was airtight and received approval that was partial at best, performative at worst. She won some. She lost more than she told anyone. Her closest friend at the hospital was Dr. Priya Mehta, emergency medicine, sharp and funny. The only person Naomi had ever genuinely relaxed around at work. Priya had a gift for saying the thing everyone else was thinking and pretending not to. "You know what your problem is." Priya had said once, over cafeteria coffee, that deserved a better word than coffee. "You care too much and show it too little, so people think you don't need anything and they give you nothing." "That's a strategy," Naomi said. "It's a lonely one." Naomi hadn't argued. She went home to a small apartment, a bookshelf of medical journals and 3 battered novels, and a plant named Gerald, who had survived 4 years of her inconsistent attention and seemed determined to outlive her. She had not been in a relationship in 3 years. The last one had ended with a man telling her that loving her felt like loving someone standing just behind glass. She hadn't argued with that either. This was her life on the Thursday in October when it rained from noon, and her pager went off at 2:14 in the morning with a message that was not a trauma call. "Dr. Osei, private matter. Doc entrance. Come alone. Do not log this page." Chiang Mai P. Chiang Mai Park was a nurse who had worked at Meridian for 11 years. Reliable, steady, the kind of person who did not send cryptic messages, the kind of person who did not send any messages at 2 in the morning. Naomi stood in the corridor outside the attending lounge and read it twice. She thought about protocol. She thought about her career. She thought about everything she'd built and the cost of building it, and whether one strange page justified walking toward whatever this was instead of away from it. She went. The dock was cold. The rain had slowed to a mist that sat on everything: the asphalt, her scrubs, the black SUV idling with its engine running at the edge of the light. Chiang Mai was beside it, and her face was the color of someone who had been frightened for a long time and was managing it through sheer will. Beside Chiang Mai was a man Naomi had never seen before. Korean, maybe 40, dark suit that was soaked through in a way that wasn't just rain. He was standing, which was more than the situation warranted. But when Naomi's eyes tracked down, she saw the red spreading across his shirt in the particular dark pattern that every trauma surgeon recognizes without having to think about it: abdominal bleed. Active. He was managing his own pain the way trained people manage it, from the inside, through stillness, through the decision to not let the body's distress reach the face. He won't go through admissions, Jiang Mai said. Her voice was barely there. I've tried. He won't, please. Man looked at Naomi. She looked back at him. She stepped forward without asking permission, pulled his jacket aside, lifted his shirt. 2 penetrating wounds left lateral. The bleeding was partially controlled by pressure, but insufficient. Her hands moved before her mind issued the instruction. Long, she said. 2 hours, Jiang Mai said. Mechanism, blade, twice. Needs an or no records. His voice was low and even, controlled. No name. Nothing in the system. You understand what you're asking me to risk. If you die on my table without a name, my career is finished. A pause. I understand what I am asking. Something in the way he said it stopped her. Not an apology, not a plea, a frank acknowledgement. I see the cost. I am asking anyway. I will not pretend otherwise. She looked at Jiang Mai. Jiang Mai looked at the ground. West Wing, Naomi said. Service corridor, procedure room. We move him now. She did not let herself think while she worked. She had learned this the hard way, that the part of the brain that processes fear and doubt is the same part that slows the hands, and her hands could not slow. Not tonight. The deeper laceration was worse than it had looked from outside, and for 30 minutes she was in a place she knew well, that narrow corridor of pure function where everything except the immediate problem ceases to exist. Jiang Mai assisted without being asked, fluent and steady, reading the surgery the way musicians read each other. The man stayed conscious longer than she would have expected. He did not make a sound. At 4:41, set down the last instrument, she stripped her gloves and looked at him. He was pale, depleted, but his eyes were open and clear. Going to live, she said, not comfort, a report. I know, he said again. And again she believed him. Out of here before 6. Can you move? Yes, you'll need antibiotics. Follow up. You'll know if something goes wrong. She hesitated. There's infection risk given the conditions. I have people. She almost asked who. She stopped herself. She almost asked his name. She stopped herself again. In the corridor, she found Jiang Mai, hands trembling now that the adrenaline had somewhere to go. Who is he? Naomi said. Jiang Mai was quiet. Then, someone I owe a debt to. Someone it would be better for you not to know more about. Naomi looked at her for a long moment. Jiang Mai did not look away, but her eyes held a specific weight, not guilt, but the heaviness of someone who exists close to danger they've learned to navigate by not numbing it. Naomi let it go. She went back in. He was sitting up too soon, and she started to tell him so, and he said, before I go. He reached into his ruined jacket, withdrew a card. Matte black. 1 line of text, a phone number, nothing else. If you need anything, he said, ever, I won't call that number. I know, he said. Keep it anyway. She put it in her coat pocket because it was easier than arguing with a man she'd just spent 2 hours keeping alive. She watched them move him into the SUV. She watched the taillights disappear. She stood in the mist for a moment with her hands at her sides. Then she went back inside, rewrote her overnight notes to account for the missing hours, and buried it. She told herself it was over for 3 years. She almost believed that if you're already hooked on this story, and I know you are, hit that like button right now. It helps more people find Naomi's story. Now, let's keep going. The weeks after were the hardest, not because of guilt, but because of the waiting, the particular dread that lives in the body rather than the mind. The kind that wakes you at 3 a.m., not with a clear thought, but with weight on the chest and a certainty that something is coming that you can't yet name. She waited for someone to find the gap in the night logs. No one did. She waited for Chiang Mai to crack. Chiang Mai didn't. They moved through their shared workspace after that with a new, careful understanding. 2 people who had witnessed something together and agreed, without a single word about it, that the thing they witnessed was now behind them. She threw away the card in week 3, or she meant to. She found it 3 weeks later in the lining of her coat, and this time she put it in the back of the middle drawer of her desk at home, which she told herself was not the same as keeping it on purpose. By month 4, she thought about the man only occasionally. In the car, driving home late. In the space just before sleep. She thought he might be dead, not from her surgery. She trusted her surgery, but from whatever he was. Whatever produced a man who appeared at a hospital dock at 2 in the morning and refused to leave a name. Those men tended toward short lives. She had treated enough of them in trauma to know. She was surprised to find that she would be sorry about that. Then in month 7, something changed at Meridian General, subtle at first, almost invisible. A grant arrived for the trauma center, private, from a foundation she'd never heard of, sufficient to cover the imaging equipment she'd been requesting for 2 years. It came through the development office, approved cleanly, equipment ordered before anyone looked at the origin too carefully. 6 months later, 2 additional surgical nursing positions were approved without the standard board deliberation. Then a technology partnership with a medical AI company, piloting a diagnostic system in her department. Specifically, Naomi noticed. She noticed everything, but she was pragmatic. She had enough active battles to receive an unexpected win without investigating its source too closely. She filed it under momentum, under the idea that 3 years of clean data had finally started to land. It was Priya who said, on a late Friday in the attending lounge, what Naomi wasn't yet letting herself think. Something is going on with this hospital. The data is working, Naomi said. 3 grants, Naomi. 2 positions. A tech deal. All of it landing in your department. Not cardiology, not oncology. Yours. Priya looked at her steadily. And the board has been quiet for 8 months. First time in your entire tenure here, they've approved 3 budget requests without pushback. Naomi said nothing. Someone is clearing the path for you. You're speculating. Observing. There's a difference. There was. Naomi drove home that night and opened the middle drawer of her desk and looked at the card without touching it for a long time. Then she closed the drawer. Then she went to bed. She did not sleep well. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning in a standard email from the CEO's office. Naomi read it at her desk between surgeries. The previous board chairman, a man whose primary talent had been avoiding consequential decisions, had retired. A new chairman had been appointed. His name was given as J.H. Park. Private investment background, significant contributor to Meridian's recent growth initiatives. Introductory meeting with senior medical staff, Thursday, 10 a.m. J.H. Park. She sat very still. Then she told herself, Park is one of the most common Korean surnames in the world. She was pattern matching her way toward a conclusion with no foundation. She was doing what people do when they've carried a secret too long, finding signals in noise, building a story out of coincidence because the brain wants the wound to resolve. She told herself this driving home. She told herself this making dinner. She told herself this lying awake at 1 a.m, staring at the ceiling with Gerald the plant watching her from the windowsill. By Thursday at 9:55, she had stopped telling herself anything and was simply standing outside the boardroom with a coffee she wasn't drinking, waiting. The room was on the 6th floor, windows facing south, the kind of morning light that on certain days was almost beautiful. Naomi had been in this room 8 times. She had arrived prepared every single time and left frustrated every single time, carrying the specific exhaustion of a woman who fights clearly and is heard only partially. Priya came in last, took the seat beside her, and said quietly, "You look like you're defusing a bomb." "Look professional," Naomi said. "Same thing with you." Door at the head of the room opened. He walked in, charcoal suit, hair shorter than she remembered. 2 people flanking him, both moving with the efficiency of people who anticipated his needs before they were spoken. He moved differently than he had on that dock, not the careful, pain-managed movement of a man protecting a wound. The full, unhurried movement of someone entirely at ease in any room he enters. He sat down at the head of the table. He looked at the room. His eyes found her. Not immediately. He was too controlled for that. But within 10 seconds of sitting, his gaze tracked through the room and arrived at her, and held for precisely 1 beat longer than anywhere else. 1 beat. Nobody else would have caught it. She looked back at him and made her face do nothing. She was very good at making her face do nothing. "Good morning," he said. His voice was exactly as she remembered, low, even. "I want to begin by saying I am here because I believe in what this hospital is doing, and specifically in what this hospital's trauma center represents. I've followed its progress closely." He said this to the room. He did not look at her when he said it. For 40 minutes, he was the most prepared person in that room. He knew the numbers, the protocols, the internal performance audits. He asked the chief of surgery 3 questions that revealed he'd done more than read the annual report. He asked Naomi 1 question. "Dr. Osei, the mortality reduction in your department, 15% over 3 years. How much do you attribute to equipment updates versus the protocol changes you implemented?" The whole room turned toward her. She met his gaze. His face was neutral, professional, waiting. "Protocols account for the baseline," she said. "Equipment accelerated specific case outcomes. They're not fully separable. The protocols were designed anticipating the equipment." "Designed by you," he said. "Yes, good," he said, and moved on just good. 2 syllables, as though 15% were a small thing. She wanted to be angry about that. She found she wasn't, quite. When the room emptied, she didn't follow. She stood at the windows, looking out at the south side, and listened to the conversations fade into the corridor. She heard the door close. She waited. When she turned, he was still there, reading something on a tablet. "You funded my department," she said. He looked up. "I invested in a hospital with strong outcomes. My department specifically." A pause. "Your department specifically," he said. "Yes, for 3 years. You could have told me. Would you have wanted to know?" She thought about it honestly. "No, probably not. Then I didn't tell you. That's not how consent works," he agreed quietly. "It isn't," she crossed her arms. "Why?" One word, carrying everything, the doc, the surgery, the years, the grants, all of it. He set down his tablet. "Because you saved my life under conditions that required you to put your own at risk," he said. "I don't receive gifts carelessly. I didn't give you a gift. I performed a surgery. You did both." She had no answer to that. He picked up his jacket. "I have no intention of complicating your position here. My role is governance. If my presence creates difficulties for you, I will take that seriously." A pause. "But I would prefer to find it doesn't." He moved toward the door. "Mr. Park," she said. He stopped. "I don't know your first name." He turned. And for the first time since he'd walked in, something in his face shifted, small, controlled, but real. "Hyan Jun," he said. "Dr. Osei," she said, reflexively. Her own name. Some instinct toward balance. "I know who you are," he said quietly. And then he left. She stood in the empty boardroom, looking at the door. 3 years. He had spent 3 years clearing the obstacles in her path, invisibly, without acknowledgement, without ever giving her a reason to feel compromised or controlled. She looked for the trap in that. She had been trained by years of institutional navigation to find the transactional undertow beneath apparent generosity. She could not find it. What she found instead was a man who had made a unilateral decision to protect something he believed in, and then stepped back and let it speak for itself. She didn't know what to do with that yet. She told Priya that evening. "Not everything, not the doc, not the surgery. Enough. He has history with the hospital. Before he was chairman. It's complicated." Priya was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is he dangerous?" "I don't know his full world," Naomi said carefully. "What I know is that he came to us instead of the system, because the system would have asked questions he couldn't answer. That tells me he has things to protect." "Dangerous to you?" Naomi thought about the grants, the nurses, the quiet 3-year repair of every obstacle in her path. "No, I don't think he is." "Do you like him?" Priya, clinically asking. "That's not clinical. You like him personally." Naomi looked at her coffee. "I don't know him. That's not the same as no." It wasn't. She went home that night and let herself sit with the real thoughts, not the managed, daylight version, but the ones that had been living in the lower register since the moment he walked into that boardroom. She thought about the fact that he had let her believe the improvements were entirely earned through her own advocacy. And they were, she knew they were. Her data had made the case, but he had removed the political obstacles. He had done what patrons do, and he had done it without the expectation of power over her. That last part was what she kept returning to. She picked up her phone twice in the following week. Put it down both times. The third time, she didn't put it down. It rang twice. Dr. Osa, he said, not a question. Looked up the Meridian Outcomes group, she said. It doesn't exist outside of the routing channel it came through. You built the structure specifically so the money arrived without your name on it, not rooted through your own foundation. You have won. A longer pause. Because anything under my name would eventually raise questions about a night that was better left without a paper trail. For your sake, she sat with that. I want to meet, she said. Not at the hospital. Miwen. They met at a Korean restaurant in the West Loop on a Wednesday evening. She arrived on time. He was already there. She had dressed simply, dark green, clean lines, her mother's ring on her right hand. He stood when she arrived. She noted it and didn't comment. For a while they talked around the edges, the hospital, the research partnership, a pediatric trauma protocol she was developing that he'd read about in the department reports with an attention that surprised her. She let herself be surprised. She let herself be, carefully, a little disarmed. Then she said, I need to know what I walked into that night. He set his glass down. You walked into something that had nothing to do with you, he said, and you handled it with a professionalism and a courage I have not forgotten. That's not an answer. It isn't. She waited. My family, he said slowly, has operated in certain spaces for a long time, not cleanly. I came into it young. I have been spending years creating distance between what my family does and what I do. That process is not finished, but it is real. People who hurt you that night dispute about that distance. One that's been resolved. Resolved how? He looked at her. Not in a way that required more of me than I was willing to give. She held his gaze. I'm not going to pretend I understand your world. I'm not asking you to. I'm not going to pretend the original situation was ethical. I know. I've never believed it was. I put you in an impossible position and made the calculation that you could handle it. A pause. I was right. That doesn't make the calculation less presumptuous. It was presumptuous. Yes, me. Specifically. Jiang Mai trusted you, he said. And I trusted Jiang Mai. Something shifted in her chest at that. The acknowledgement that it had come through Jiang Mai's trust, a woman who had worked beside Naomi for years and had understood her well enough to make a high-stakes call in the dark. She's good, Naomi said. I know. She's been carrying this too. I know. I've tried to make that easier where I could. You look after the people in your orbit. I tried to. She was quiet for a moment. Is that what this was? Looking after me, he met her eyes directly. No. At first I was honoring a debt. Then I became interested in your work. He paused. Then both things were true at the same time, and I let them be. Don't want anything from you, he said. I want to be clear. Not professionally. Not personally. Nothing. What I've done at this hospital, I've done because I believed in it. If you find my presence here is a problem you can't manage, I will protect what you've built and step back. Personally, she said. Before she could decide not to, he looked at her steadily. Personally, he said carefully, I would very much like to have dinner with you again, under no other expectation. She looked at him. She thought about the armor, about the man who'd said loving her felt like loving someone behind glass, about Priya saying it's a lonely strategy, about the way this man, 3 years ago, had looked at her in the minutes after she'd kept him alive, with a directness she had never fully put out of her mind. "Just dinner," she said, "just dinner," he confirmed. "You understand I will run my department without interference. I would expect nothing else. If you ever go around me instead of to me, we are done. Understood? I want no part of your other world. Don't want you to have any part of it." She picked up her glass. "Then yes," she said, "dinner again." Something moved in his face. Real, small. The kind of thing a person shows when they don't usually show things. If this story is hitting different, you know what to do. Drop a comment, tell me what part got you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. There's one more batch, and it's the one that will stay with you. What followed was not simple. Nothing worth having ever is, and Naomi was not a woman who would have trusted something simple. Simple meant incomplete. Simple meant something hadn't been examined closely enough. Some corner hadn't been lit. They had dinner once a week for 2 months before anything shifted. She learned him in pieces. A father who had built power in ways meant to be inherited by a son who hadn't wanted to inherit it that way. A younger sister in soul. He spoke to every week with a warmth in his voice she hadn't expected. Years of building legitimate business alongside the family structure he was deliberately, painstakingly separating himself from. He told her he wasn't finished. He told her plainly, and she appreciated that more than she could immediately say. She gave him her history, in pieces too. Baltimore. Her mother's hands on a mop handle at 5 a.m. medical school. The 3 women who became 2, then 1. The board meetings. The grants denied. The years of making herself irreducible so the institution couldn't choose to ignore her. The loneliness she had wrapped so tightly in purpose that it had stopped feeling like loneliness and started feeling like focus. He listened the way some people listen, not waiting for his turn, but actually receiving what she gave. She found, with him, that she was not behind glass. She found the opposite. At the hospital, they were scrupulously professional. She had learned the cost of perceived favoritism, the specific doubt it plants in people who are looking for a reason to attribute her work to someone else's support rather than her own competence. She would not give anyone that reason. He understood this without her having to explain it fully. At board meetings, he was her chairman and nothing more, and the line they held was clean. There was a night, about 4 months in, that she came to think of as the one that settled something. She had come through a brutal shift, multi-vehicle accident, 3 critical patients at once, and one of them, a 12-year-old boy she had lost despite everything. She sat in the attending lounge at 6 in the morning, in the particular stillness that follows when you have done everything right, and it still wasn't enough, and the world just moves on. Her phone buzzed, a text from Hyun Jun. "I saw the incident report." "Are you all right?" She stared at it. He had seen the administrative report. Significant incidents went to the chairman's office, and his first instinct had been her. She typed back, "No, 3 seconds, I'm outside." She laughed. She had not expected to laugh. She went downstairs, and he was in the parking structure in his car with coffee. Not the terrible cafeteria kind, but the real kind from the place she'd mentioned once, weeks ago, in passing. He handed it to her when she got in, and he didn't say anything. She talked. He listened. At some point she cried, which she almost never did. And he did not make a production of that either. He simply stayed. When she got out to go back for morning rounds, she stood at the car door. "Hyun-jun," she said. "Naomi, thank you." She had not thanked him. Not for any of it, not the grants, not the positions, not 3 years of invisible support, not the dinners or the listening. She had received all of it and acknowledged it and sat with it. But she had not said thank you, because thank you requires a specific vulnerability. The kind that opens you to exactly as much of another person as you've been protected against. She was ready now. He nodded once, not making it larger than it was, just receiving it. She went back inside. There was a conversation she owed Jiang Mai. She found her in the break room on a Thursday afternoon, which was as reliable as whether Jiang Mai's schedule was one of the few predictable things in the hospital. Jiang Mai looked up when she came in. Something in her face prepared itself, the slight bracing of a person who has been waiting for a reckoning and has decided to meet it standing. Naomi poured water, sat down across from her. "I know who he is," she said. "I mean more than I knew 3 years ago. I know he's at the hospital. I know why the department improved. I know the shape of what he comes from." Jiang Mai folded her hands on the table. "Are you angry with me?" "I was," Naomi said, "for a while, for putting me in that position without telling me what I was walking into. If I had told you, I wouldn't have come. I know. You made the calculation that I would be safe with him, and he would be safe with me. You were right." Jiang Mai nodded slowly. "I want to know one thing," Naomi said. "Not about his family or his world or that night. About him." Jiang Mai waited. "Is he a good man?" Question was simple, and Jiang Mai received it as the serious thing it was. "He has done things in his life that good men don't do," she said carefully. "And he has spent a long time trying to become someone different than the person he was raised to be. I think," she paused, "I think goodness isn't a thing you are. It's a thing you keep choosing. And I have watched him choose it over and over in situations where he didn't have to." Naomi nodded. "He has never spoken to me about you directly," Jiang Mai said. "But I know he hasn't forgotten you. He is not capable of forgetting a debt. He's built that way." "I know," Naomi said. She stood to leave. "Dr. Osei." She turned. "You deserve it," Jiang Mai said. "All of it. The work and everything else. You deserve it." Naomi stood in the doorway for a moment. The weight of 3 years sitting between them quietly, not gone, but distributed differently. The way weight becomes manageable when you stop carrying it alone. "Thank you, Jiang Mai," she said 5 months into his chairmanship. A journalist came looking. Her name was Serena Liu. 28, thorough, 8 months into a story about private investment in Chicago healthcare. She reached Naomi through the public affairs office, professional, careful. Could Dr. Osei speak to the origins of her department's growth and the grants that had funded it? Naomi read the inquiry once. Then she called Hyun-jun. "There's a reporter. I heard this morning. She'll find the trail. It leads to you. When it does, it leads back to a question nobody can answer cleanly." "Hyun-jun," she stopped, started again. "I need to know you didn't see this coming. I need to know this isn't," she didn't finish, a beat of silence. "Asking whether I knew and said nothing. No, I didn't know. I'm telling you that now, and I understand if you need more than my word, she breathed. What does she have right now? The grant structure, not the source. 4 more days of work, and she finds the source. Then we have 4 days. What does she find at the end of the trail? Me, he said. And if she looks further, my family name, which means questions about things that have nothing to do with this hospital or with you. They're anything that could damage the hospital itself, not if it's handled correctly. Then we get ahead of it, she said. Naomi, I'm not going to let you handle this without me, she said, clear, final. This is my department. My career is part of this story whether I choose it or not. So I decide how I'm part of it. A pause. Then, all right. She went to the CEO, Franklin Reed, that afternoon, and she told him what he needed to know to act. The board chairman had a prior relationship with the hospital, had provided private philanthropic support to the trauma center before his appointment, and a journalist was close to publishing. She did not tell him about the doc. She did not tell him about October. She told him what he needed, and she told him the outcome she required. Reed moved quickly. The hospital's communications team reached Serena Liu with an offer. Full transparency, on the record, framed as a story about private philanthropy in public healthcare infrastructure. An exclusive, the story ran 2 weeks later. The Quiet Patron, how one board chairman built Chicago's best trauma center. Factually accurate. Every word, Naomi read it in her car in the parking structure. That same spot, her spot now. The place she went when she needed to think. Her work was credited fully and clearly. His investment was framed as strategic philanthropy. The story did not ask why he had followed her outcomes for years before he formally joined the board. It did not look for the origin of his interest. She called him when she finished. It's good. Your work is described well. A pause. I handled it. You handled it exactly right. I know, she said. She heard him almost laugh. By the end of the first year of his chairmanship, Naomi's Trauma Center was the most cited in the Midwest. She had been invited to present at the National Trauma Care Symposium in Washington, a stage she'd been building toward for 4 years. She wrote the presentation in the evenings at her kitchen table, with Gerald on the windowsill and music low on the speaker, and increasingly, Hyan Jun on the other end of a phone call that started as a check-in and ran long into the night. She was not behind glass with him. She had found, in him, something she hadn't known she was missing. A person who was not reduced by the way she occupied space, who did not need her smaller or warmer or more convenient, who had seen her most controlled, the boardroom, the dock, the operating room at 2 a.m., and was interested rather than daunted. And she had found in herself something she'd packaged away and labeled inefficiency a long time ago. The willingness to be known, not through her outcomes and her data and her 15%, actually known in the way that requires you to let someone see the parts you don't perform. She showed him those parts slowly. He held them carefully. She held his in return. On the morning of the Washington Symposium, she stood at a podium in front of 400 people. Surgeons, researchers, policymakers, and she presented 3 years of outcomes that showed what becomes possible when the conditions are right. When someone believes in the work enough to clear the path, she presented without flinching and without false modesty, the way she did everything. In the audience, 3 rows back, Hyun Jun Park sat with his tablet closed, listening. Afterward, in the corridor outside the ballroom, she found him beside her. "Good," she said. "Extraordinary," he said. She didn't deflect. She had been working on that. They walked out into the March afternoon, the kind where the light is sharp and new, and the city feels like it's beginning something. She had her phone out, 3 messages already from surgeons who wanted to discuss the protocols, and he was beside her, unhurried, and they were 2 people who had met in the worst possible circumstances, and were making from those circumstances something still being built. She put the phone away. "Next year I want to expand the pediatric component," she said. "There's a gap in the literature on hemorrhagic shock management in under-resourced level I centers. I want to fill it." "What do you need?" She looked at him. "A grant I apply for myself." "Through the right channels," he smiled. "Fully this time, write the application," he said. "It'll be a good one." She thought about arguing. She let it go. There was a difference, she had learned, between being undermined and being believed in. She had spent a long time learning to tell them apart. She was sure now. The afternoon light held. The city moved around them, and Naomi Grace Osei, who had buried a secret in October 3 years ago, and then built something extraordinary anyway, in the years of silence and patience and careful, relentless work, walked forward into whatever came next with her armor packed away and her hands, for once, carrying only what she chose. Some people make a choice in the dark and spend the rest of their lives running from it. Naomi made a choice in the dark, and it rebuilt her, not because he saved her. She never needed saving. She had been saving people her entire life, in conditions designed to make that saving impossible, with instruments that should have been better, in rooms that should have been fuller, fighting boards that should have listened sooner. She needed someone to see the foundation she'd already built and protect it without asking to own it. He did that. And she, the woman who had learned to carry everything alone, who had wrapped her loneliness so tightly in purpose it had stopped hurting, who had stood behind glass for so long she'd forgotten it was glass. She let him. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything, if this story moved you. And I think it did. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Like this video, subscribe so you never miss a story like this one, and drop in the comments which moment hit you hardest. The dock, the boardroom, the parking structure at 6 in the morning with real coffee and no words. I read every single comment. See you in the next one. Fire.